G'day guys. So I made the mistake of logging on to news.com.au the other day and was confronted with a story which said, quote, Byron Bay family can't afford to buy a house with $140,000 saving. And I thought, this sounds like an interesting story. I wonder what these guys are up to down in Byron. So I thought I'd post up a video of my reaction to this news story, plus a few interesting points surrounding the story. As per usual, news.com has somehow managed to be both hysterical, wrong, and idiotic in the same post. I'll post up a link to the full story with this video. But before we kick this off, make sure that you like, subscribe, and leave any comments below. Subscriptions really help grow my base and allow me to post more of these videos and have more people see them. Essentially, the crux of this story is his family, his mum, his dad, and this kid have been living in Byron Bay for more than 15 years. Yet, despite having nearly 150 grand savings, cannot afford to buy a property in Byron. I mean, Byron's pretty expensive to start with. The median house sold there for over $1 million last year. And it's a rapidly growing area, lots of celebrities moving in. It's sort of like the Northern Rivers Bondi. It's a weird mix of people that don't believe in science but also arrive in helicopters and private jets in order to hang out at the beach. Okay, so at first pass of this story, I thought, alright, these guys have got 140 grand in savings. So generally, if you're going to borrow for a standard villa home loan, you need between 10-20% deposit. So 20% at 140 grand means they should be able to buy a house at around 700 grand. So then I'm like, all right, might be a bit of a push to get a place in Byron for 700 grand, but you could probably get a unit or a little place a bit out of town. Then I decided to read on in the story. My first red flag upon reading the story further on was, and I quote, the naturopath runs a wellness business alongside his massage therapist wife from the home they rent. Okay, so they're both self-employed. So one of the things when it comes to getting money for a home loan when you're self-employed is you have to be able to show the taxable income to the bank. Not the cashies you pull on the side, not the exchanges you do, not the fact that you write all your groceries off on tax. They take the profit from your business and the income you declare as your personal income and use that for servicing. If you're actually making 100 grand a year, but you're only declaring you make 30 grand a year, the bank says, all right, you're making 30 grand a year. I read on further and they say, generally for what we need, because we work from home, we need something substantial as we need a clinic and office space. So we're looking at a 3 or 4 bedroom house, which are between $800 and $1.5 million around here. I mean, yeah, a 4 bedroom house is probably going to be around 800 grand to 1.5. I mean, with 140 grand deposit, you can probably stretch to 800, maybe 900 if you go at 10%, something like that. Okay, so we're still in the game. I wonder what else is going on. So here's the kicker. Then I read the next paragraph down, which says, we have to look at what we can afford to buy. So we went into the bank and basically we're looking at buying something around $400,000, which is not available here. Stop. Red flag alert. This line is the key part of this story. This story isn't actually about housing unaffordability in Byron Bay. This story is actually about the income declaration these guys are making here. Because they're saying, according to the bank servicing calculations, they can only buy something for around 400 grand. Once we take the deposit of 140 out of that, 400 grand less 140 means they can actually only borrow about $260,000 to buy a house with. That means that essentially the only free income they have is 260 grand worth of cash flow for borrowing. Let's think about this for a second. If the maximum they reckon they can buy a property for is 400 grand, excluding their 140 grand deposit, that means all they can borrow is 260 grand, which makes me think perhaps the income they're declaring isn't realistic. Further on, he says that they put 140 grand away for a house, but have been waiting for the prices to drop. I mean, if you look at the broader macro history of real estate in Australia and houses in Australia, price drops on houses, again, not like investment units on the Gold Coast or anything zany like that, literally brick and mortar houses, real estate prices basically never drop as it stands at the moment. I mean, they may in the future because we're in this weird inflationary free money environment, but putting money away to wait for house prices to drop is a pretty bad strategy if you actually want to buy a house. Then towards the tail of the article notes that currently the couple make $1,200 a week from their wellness business, but are looking at branching into other ways to make money, while they also sell their own muesli on the side too. Firstly, that is a sentence. Whatever journalist decided to write that. Good on them for having a side hustle. I like that. So they're essentially saying they make $1,200 a week So let's say, what's that, about 60 grand a year? If they're self-employed, which they are, in a massage and naturopathy type business, that means they'll have fluctuating income as well, because customers come and go at different times. It's not a uniform flow. I'm going to assume they're saying $1,200 a week as their top line number, and then pulling expenses out of the bottom of that. The core crux of this article, and the problem with this article, is not the housing issues within Byron Bay. It's the fact that these guys are trying to borrow 800 grand on the back of $1,200 a week income. It's just not a viable sum of money. They said that they're looking for something around the 400 grand range with 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom house. I don't know where you can find that. In fact, I'm going to do a search of domain.com right now and tell you where you can find that. From my brief hunt around on the internet, it seems like the only place you can get a 3-bedroom house for around 400 grand is way out in Casino, Lismore. There's a couple of places in West Tweed. There's none in Byron Bay. And again, this just comes from an unrealistic expectation. Like, you've never been able to buy a 4-bedroom house for 400 grand anywhere I know of in metropolitan Australia for probably 6 years, 5 years. So I feel like News.com's article is extremely disingenuous here, because whilst the title is Hardworking Aussie Battlers Can't Afford House in Overpriced Suburb, it is actually hardworking Aussie battlers don't have the income to take on that level of debt. And the flip side of this would be, and I bash banks all the time about being way too conservative about literally everything, but let's say you lent these guys 600 grand for a house, and it put them in financial stress because they couldn't make the repayments on that. And then that bank ended up selling the property from them. Then there'd be a News.com article going, hardworking Aussie battlers home taken away from greedy bank. Further down in the article, he then writes that, I think it's crazily valued and overpriced. That's probably what it feels like the most. How can you have something in this town that's twice the price of a similar town down the road? I mean, yeah, but that's just also how the game works, right? Like, there's nothing you can do about that. I'm sure if he'd made the decision to purchase a property 15 years ago, he wouldn't be complaining. And the properties down the road that are half the price are probably going to increase in value over the next 10 years as populations sprawl out. The wider macroeconomic environment is always going to change. Things are going to go up, things are going to go down, inflation's going to come, inflation's going to go, interest rates are going to go up, interest rates are going to go down. You can't control any of these variables because they're too macro for any one person to have an effect on. News.com then finalizes his entire article by quoting the person in question as saying, we're looking at our savings getting depleted as we get no interest in the bank, and then we're looking at inflation of everything going up. Even though we've got money, we're looking at it getting eaten away by inflation. Okay. Look, like, this is just a classic News.com fear-mongering article about someone who's just missed the opportunity to purchase a property in an up-and-coming suburb. Whilst I'm personally sympathetic for the guy, because that's a shitty situation to be in, the fact of the matter is, the only way to get around this is either lobby for social collapse and then take over property once society collapses, or buy somewhere cheaper. You got 140 grand cash, but hit an investment property out west, get some income, get that growth happening. The other thing is he's complaining about savings being eaten up by low interest rates. Invest in another product. This is why overall, financial education, financial literacy, and investment education are so important. These are all solvable logistical problems, but people just don't have the education to make these decisions. So overall, guys, let me know what you think about this article. I'll post it up in the comments section. Leave your comments below and don't forget to subscribe and like on this. Thanks.